more of the people that we wish were here.
Yeah.
They really don't know what they're missing at times. All right. They try to block it out, or the devil tries to block out from them the enjoyment that we have here. I feel like we're going to have a good worship service today. I'm sure Brother Mike has got another good class for us this morning. I'm looking forward to it, so I'm going to go ahead and welcome him up here.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
We are in the book of Genesis. We are in chapter 9. Last week, we talked about the covenant and that God made with man that he would not flood the earth again. We talked about the sign of the covenant being the rainbow, and what that meant, and that every time we see it, it should remind us of the covenant. We talked about the little green men and the pots of gold and all of that. We talked about Noah and his family being blessed with the great responsibility of replenishing the earth again, just as Adam and Eve were required to do so once they were created in the garden. We had quite a bit of side conversations too last week because we didn't really cover very much, and I am suspecting that we might have that again today. Because we're going to pick up with chapter 9 and verse 5. I'm sorry, that's not right. Verse 18. And the sons of Noah that went forth of the ark were Shem, and Ham, and Japheth, and Ham is the father of Canaan. These are the three sons of Noah, and of them was the whole earth overspread. And Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. Father, our word study, I have three words here. Father is Af, and father of an individual. Of God as father of his people, a head or founder of a household, group, family, or clan, an ancestor, grandfather, forefathers. That word basically is a male word for the head. Overspread is nafats, and it means to shatter or break, dash, beaten to pieces, to pulverize, to scatter, disperse, overspread, or be scattered. Husbandman is adama, and it refers to the ground and the land, and specifically a man of the earth. And vineyard is gerem, and it means a vineyard. There's no other words for that. We see here in this verse, we're talking about sons, Noah's sons again. They're mentioned by name again, and this time Ham is mentioned as the father of Canaan, is how we pronounce that. It's not actually pronounced Canaan, but we see that mentioned because Moses is telling the story, and if you've ever told a story where you know the ending of how things went, and you're trying to tell it from the perspective of chronological order, you're going to interject some things in there as you tell the story just because you have the knowledge. Moses is telling the story, he already knows that Ham is the father of Canaan, and he already knows that Canaan was cursed, and then the land of Canaan was cursed. So he's telling us, as he's listing these sons of Noah, and he does Ham last, and then he says that he's the father of Canaan, he's already letting us know that something's going to happen here. Because he's not worried about the other two. I mean, we know that through the lineage of Shem, we're going to get to Jesus Christ, but he doesn't mention that as he goes, because Moses doesn't know that Jesus Christ is coming. He doesn't know that yet. But, I mean, he may know it, but he doesn't know which one of the three sons. But he knows what has happened here with Ham. Ham had 4 sons, which is significant, that Moses would have known about also. Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. And again, he doesn't mention any of the other sons. He just mentions Canaan. So Moses is relaying to us something significant is coming with the relationship between Ham and Canaan. And on top of that, their journeys are taking them at this time as they're traveling. As I read, they're on their way to that land, which is going to become Canaan. So he's also is another piece of the significant puzzle as to why he mentions Canaan, and he doesn't mention any of the other three sons of Ham. Then we see in the verse that Noah began to be a husbandman. Now, if you study the word, what would that tell you? If you just cursory, just read right over that, he began to be a husbandman. If you read that, you'll say, well, he's starting to do something. But the fact of the matter is, Noah is restarting to be a husbandman. It's something that he has always been until the time where he needed to stop doing it to start building the ark. He's starting to do it over again. Go ahead.
Well, just on the way here, I was listening to a preacher on radio, and he made mention that a husbandman, the word husbandman was brought up in his sermon. He made mention that a husbandman was a farmer.
Yeah.
Just
Man of the earth.
Yeah.
Right. A farmer. Again, the only thing I say to you is that when I read this, I get the lesson first. When I read that, I'm thinking, okay, he's picking up a new trade because I'm thinking somebody's got to do it now. All of the people that once were alive are now dead.
Yeah.
So when it says he began to be a husbandman, I'm thinking that's not something he was beforehand and he needed to become one. But everybody is very commonly and widely accepted that Noah is restarting something that he did before he stopped to build the ark. In other words, he was always a farmer, is what I'm saying. It doesn't mention the fact that he stopped. There's no mention of time lapsing from the time that they got off the ark and building the altar and all the subsequent. I mean, I'm sure that they needed to tend to family needs. You needed shelter. You needed all that stuff. So there's no verse here of time from the time they got off the ark as to when he started to become the farmer. But I'm showing you this picture because do you know what mountains those are?
Ararat.
Mount Ararat on the right, Little Ararat on the left. This city is Yerevan. And this is the city that it is suspected that Noah and his family, when they exited the ark, this is where they migrated to, and Noah's vineyards are located, most think, in this city. This city to this day still is a wine-producing city. They still have vineyards in this city. And they believe that this is where Noah, when he came down off the mountains with him and his children and the wives, that this is where they started doing their farming. The next two verses, and he drank of the wine and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brethren without. Now, one of the things that I'm pretty sure we're going to sit here for a while, because I've spent a lot of time looking into the whole drinking of the wine thing, and I know that there are a wide variety of opinions as to whether or not drinking alcohol or fermented drink is okay or not. And I'm sure we're going to get into a conversation about that. But I got to tell you that as I continued to read and look into this, I'm really not certain that this particular part of the Bible is the place to start the conversation as to whether or not a drink is okay or not. And there's a reason why I say that, and that is, number one, Noah didn't have a drink. Noah drank and got drunk. And there's an incident that takes place afterwards that when we talk about it, we'll see that it wasn't a good one. And that Noah has some consequences. And so I'm going to just let the conversation go and let the Spirit have His way. And if we get into conversation, which I'm pretty sure we will, we'll just let the Spirit do what it's going to do. Okay? So the word study here is wine. Yayin is the Hebrew word used here, and it means wine. There was no other definitions of that word. Whether it was fermented, not fermented, it didn't say. It just said wine. Drunken was shakar, and it means to be or become drunk or drunken, to be intoxicated. Noah's son Ham, which is actually Ham, means hot. Canaan means the lowland. And nakedness, the condition in which Noah was found, which I also found interesting, is ervah, and it means nakedness, nudiness, shame. Pudenda, and I don't even know what that word means, implying shameful exposure, nakedness of a thing, indecency, improper behavior, exposed or undefended. Now, the word wine, it has a very general definition, meaning it means wine. It doesn't specify whether or not what he's drinking is fermented or not fermented. However, what we do know is Moses got drunk. So at some point in time, we have to entertain the idea we're talking about an intoxicating beverage. So then I started to look, okay, well, in the days of Noah, is there any information about how we get to a beverage being intoxicating, i.e. like alcoholic? And one of the interesting things is that I think we all know, there was no fermentation process like how we create beer or wine today, where we start adding a whole bunch of stuff to it to make it what it is. We're literally talking about, and can I also say this, what I have learned is when it says wine doesn't necessarily mean of grapes. I know that when we think of wine in a vineyard, we think of grapes, because that's what we do today. Our vineyards are just mountainsides of grape vines. In reading up on the word wine, it very clearly noted that you can make a beverage from various fruits. You just took a whole bunch of them and you pressed them, and then you had juice. And then that's what they drank.
Yeah.
Whatever was plentiful in that region. Now I showed you the picture, and what we are talking about here is a region that does have a bountiful vineyard of grapes. So I just want to make sure that I'm giving you everything that I have learned about this word, and I haven't learned a whole lot because I've been really stuck, and if you don't ask me some questions, we're going to be hurt here, because all week I've been stuck on wine. And I've been reading on wine, so I'm letting you know we ain't going very much further than this conversation today. But I did learn, and then I got to thinking about it because I've worked in a jail. I know what people can do with very limited means. I know that you can make an I don't know. See, I don't even like the word alcoholic. You can make an intoxicating beverage out of potatoes. You can get high off of banana peels. So I'm well aware that you don't have to do very much to anything for it to be bad. I read John MacArthur. Yeah, go ahead, brother.
Anything that decomposes ferments. Anything.
Yes, that is absolutely true.
Anything that
Anything
rotting
that ferments.
is turning into alcohol.
or oil.
Yeah, I mean, that's just.
One or the other. I think foliage kind of like turns into, but that's the point. And I read a lot from John MacArthur, and what he's saying is you could. I mean, there's things when we start talking about this alcohol business that we have to separate today from then. They simply didn't have what we have. You can't make grape juice in Noah's day, add some preservatives to it, and then stick it in a refrigerator and keep it for a month. And still drink it. That didn't happen.
Well, it's like Jesus said, you don't stick new wine in an old wineskin.
Right.
Because
Because
it'll
the process
ferment
is-
and it'll blow up the skin.
That's right. And that's because of the process of the day, which is they would take the pressing, the juice, and they would put it in a skin. But I'm not even certain that that technology in Jesus' day was around in Noah's day.
No, somebody did it and they learned.
Somebody had to learn. I'm also going to share with you a lot of things that I've read that are speculation. There's speculation that Noah really didn't understand what he was doing while he was drinking, because since it's never been mentioned before, which is the truth, up until now, this being the first book of the Bible, and up until now, we haven't read anything about anybody getting drunk. That has been a sin that has not yet been committed until right now. And now we're learning about it. Now that's what some people say. My kind of thinking on that is, if Noah was already a farmer, and there were all of these people that were so very wicked, and they were farmers, I don't know. I'm certain somewhere somebody did something not right. But that's the speculation. My thing is that with them living in an area where it gets very, very hot, and you put juice that has absolutely no preservatives, and quite frankly, I don't know how fast that works, because I've never just taken grapes and crushed them to get the juice and then not done it. We don't do that now. We add stuff to our beverages to preserve them so that they can last.
I learned to be like cider.
Well, that's another thing. I read a preacher on this. I came across, there's actually, let me tell you, there's a lot of what do you college folk call it when you write papers that are that thick? What's that called? Dissertation. I've come across several dissertations on this wine and alcohol issue. And one had told of a story that he witnessed, where a gentleman who had never in his life had apple cider, but drank it and not necessarily became drunk, but it definitely affected him in some way, shape, or form, that because he wasn't so used to it, it affected his behavior, and this guy is watching his behavior change right in front of his eyes, and all this guy is really doing is drinking this apple cider. And I guess it just depends on the apple cider. Was it sugar added, whatever? Well, what I'm saying is that in Noah's day, I'm not even sure that they kept it in the lambskins. I don't know if that had been invented or not. That's not information that we have at the moment. And it would be speculation.
The cider, when you first make it, that's when you want to drink it. But then it gets what they call hard. That's just before it turns into vinegar.
Yeah.
If you get it when it's hard, you can't get it intoxicated.
All right. So then there's the theory that because of that, and in the turning, I like that word, the turning process, because that's what happens with what we're talking about, new wine, old wine. It's the turning inside the lambskin, because there's no preservatives. There's gases that are released that expand the lambskin as it ferments inside of that container. And then not only is it expanding the skin, but it's also having a reaction, leaving certain elements on the inside of the skin. I don't want to call it sugar, but whatever chemicals, and I'm not, again, outside of my education, but I know that there's something else. It's not just the gas. That wine is doing something to the inside. So then when you take that out and you put new wine in there and you go through all of it, it bursts because you're only going to go so far. That lambskin is only going to go so far. So the question then becomes, did Noah know what he was doing? There's a theory that what they're talking about here is that they're drinking because they're celebrating the harvest. And so the family got together and they're feasting and they're drinking because they're celebrating this harvest. And that's why we're learning about the fact that he drank and got drunk. Go ahead.
I was just thinking as you were saying that, and I'm sure if we start making comments and stuff, we might get ahead of you on things, but
I told you I'm letting the Spirit go with this one, buddy.
with what strikes me is, when you said at first about that Noah may not have known, it might be the first time he was doing what he was doing, and when you said I'm not so sure I would buy that, I'm thinking the same thing. But yet then when you were just saying what you're saying now, it strikes me as, remember, he was the one, the only one that God found righteous to be the only man left other than his sons.
Right.
And he was always a follower of God. He always did. Why, after God brought him through all that, would one of the first things he do go sit and get drunk?
Yeah.
Because it's God's purpose. Let me show you God's purpose. There's a purpose behind that. Is as soon as they come out of the ark, he introduces the sons of Noah. Now they, verse 20. And Noah began to be a husbandman, which is a farmer, or whatever we said he was. And he planted a vineyard, and he drank of the wine and the drunk. Why did he plant the vineyard? It's God's purpose. So he can drink the wine and get drunk. There's a purpose behind it.
No, it was that way.
Now listen to this. Noah, the great hero of faith, got drunk. A poor example of godliness to his sons. Perhaps this story is included to show us that even godly people can sin and that their bad influence affects their families. It's affecting the family because Noah cursed the son's son. Possibility will still exist.
He cursed one of the sons.
And his family, Ham's mocking attitude reveals a severe lack of respect. Okay, now, chapter 9, verse 25. And Noah led was tells us, I'm getting ahead of it a little bit.
Yes, you are.
Maybe not. But anyway, this verse has been wrongfully used to support racial prejudice and even now.
Yeah.
God knew this was going to happen because of the Canaanites. Okay? There was a purpose for it. The curse was fulfilled when the Israelites entered the promised land and drove the Canaanites out.
I agree that there was a purpose, and just like there's a purpose for a lot of the sin that God allows, and that our free will and how we're supposed to learn from those and their testimonies, and there's going to be testimonies throughout the whole Bible of people who have sinned and everything. And the book of Genesis, being the first book, is the book of the foundation. So we're going to, and we're reading everything that you're saying. The question is that I'm trying to be respectful to, and that's why I said, I'm not exactly sure that this is the place where we're going to be able to decide whether or not. And I don't know if we'll ever be able to decide, but it's fun having the argument, at least in my perspective, talking about it, as to whether or not having a drink is okay or not. Because it was willing, and he wasn't forced to drink. He wasn't tricked into drinking. He did it on purpose. I agree with you, Pastor, because, like I said, there are theories that he doesn't know what he was doing. There was the theory that the juice was not something that he was used to. drinking, or that it could have been stronger than he thought it was, and whatever, and that because he approached it from an ignorant standpoint, not necessarily held accountable to the same standard. And when I was reading that, I went back to the conversation that we were having about online on Facebook there about a person who thinks whether or not that a woman can be the pastor of a church, and the authority issue and all of that, and that if somebody is interpreting the Bible in a certain way and they don't know that they're wrong, then how do they become accountable that they're wrong? You know what I mean? If they really believe that there's scripture that backs them up and supports them, and they truly believe that. I don't want you to wait too much longer. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, couldn't it be that, I mean, I've watched plenty of television shows about how they make wine,
Yep.
and especially about the person that owns the vineyard. And when the wine is ready, they taste it
Yeah.
to make sure that it's ready. Couldn't it be that he just tasted it to make sure it was ready and liked the taste?
But the
and
question
had no
is,
drink?
is his vineyard the same as the vineyard that is on your TV show? See, I don't necessarily believe that when we're talking about a vineyard and that he planted, we're talking about a vineyard that's going to make a bazillion bottles of wine.
Well, no,
There
not
wasn't a
necessarily.
bazillion people on the planet.
But he still yet, if you grow something, I mean, if I was to grow a garden of tomatoes,
Your intent
Okay.
would be to consume
when
the
those
tomatoes.
tomatoes turn red, I'm gonna go out there and grab one, take a bite of it, and say, they're ready. And then I'm gonna take another bite, and then another bite. And I might just thunder myself on tomatoes.
Go ahead.
What we gotta take into effect is science.
Yep.
They have no refrigeration, they have no preservatives, they have nothing to preserve something. So when you take something, a fruit, tomato, wine, grape, whatever, and you squeeze it and you get the juice out of it and it sits there, the sugars in that, they turn to alcohol.
That's
In a hot environment, it's not gonna take very
No,
long.
it's not.
Right. Now the question as to whether or not he knew that is whether or not he was familiar with that process. That's what I'm saying.
But it's all speculation.
But it's all speculation because it doesn't clearly say. I guess no. Go ahead.
Here's another thing. He could have very well been familiar with the process. What we're not taking into account is there was a flood, everything was wiped out, everything started over, and was it exactly the same?
See, that was another theory, is that because of the weight of the water, it compressed onto the earth and it changed everything. I don't know if chemically is the right way to say that. With all of the that big chart of compounds and all that, and how it just changed the nature of everything, including, how trees grow, because we don't know what it looked like beforehand.
See, I really want to stick with the thought of, I can't see how, if Noah was who he was prior to the flood, that when the flood was over, he changed.
Well, I don't think that, I personally don't think that he changed, because
Something had to be different that got that.
as we continue to read, Noah doesn't lose his righteousness.
Right.
This is a mistake. And as we continue, we're going to see how it's a mistake. And even though it doesn't say, well, Noah sinned, you're going to see things that happen that show that he really shouldn't have done this.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be consequences for his drunkenness.
Yes.
So if you look at that, then you have to deduce that it was not okay.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think God waited till later to say drunkenness is a sin in the Bible? Why didn't he say it then?
He might have.
He might have. No, Moses is telling us the story, and I'm sure he's telling us the story because God had a purpose
That's right.
for him to tell us the story. This may very well be the introduction to saying, hey, drunkenness is not okay.
The thing with the whole food and everything after the flood is, it's pretty well scientifically proven that it changed because they have all these fossils of things that we don't know what they are. And prior to the flood, we were to be vegetarians and eat the plants.
Right.
And after the flood, then we could eat the meats and things like that. because of the food.
There was no
Foods were
food.
gone.
That's right.
What they had for us to be nutritionally founded in is gone. That's why we quit living so long.
Right.
Because we're not getting the nutritions that our bodies were created to absorb.
Not only that, but think about this too, when you talk about preservatives, they didn't really need preservatives because their whole lifestyle was to take only what they needed.
That's right.
Yeah.
We are the ones that take way more than what we need and had to figure out a way to preserve it so we didn't lose it.
There's
So
a
don't
whole
go.
argument with the Bible and biblical and doing what God says that, this whole being of a community